I see all this stuff out there, all these plans, all these food plans, but nobody really talks about how to know which is the best, how to become a wise, informed consumer, how to sort between which is really what I need versus what I don't need. And then everybody wants to sell you something, but they don't want to inform you about what it is you really would require for whether it's to live or even to live healthy lives. Because again, another pet peeve I'm hearing from some of you is that there's stuff out there, but would I want to eat it? And that's getting better, and I'm hoping to share with you some of that too. And I'm just going to have to stop at this point. There's just been something that's just settled in me, and I was asking Ron, I said, should I share that or should I not share that? And I just can't shake it, so I'm going to share it, and then I can go on with food, okay? Because it all fits together. It all interrelates. There's this phrase we've been praying through that I'll have to spell for you. It's what is the missing piece, P-I-E-C-E, in peace, P-E-A-C-E, as it applies to preparedness, okay? Because we get all these fear things, and people are like, oh no, just panic and fear. And so there's something missing, because the Lord did not create us to walk in fear. He created us to walk in P-E-A-C-E. So it's like, what is that missing P-I-E-C-E? And we've been praying over it a couple weeks, and I had a visit with a friend a couple days ago, and it started churning again, and I walked in here today and I felt it again. So I'm going to tell you what I think some of it is, because you may be facing this when you go back home. I think some of it is that the body of Christ is not, it's like they're getting territorial, like there are turf war things going on with preparedness groups or training groups or companies, or like each person has a piece and it's my piece, and I am adamant about this, and I know this from the Lord. It's going to take all of us working together, linking arms, networking, sharing what we know with others and what they know, sharing our ideas, sharing our hearts, sharing our lives with one another. And that will bring us peace, because it's about functioning in community in the body of Christ. So I don't know if the reason that's just been such a heavy thing on me today is because of something that somebody has said, or it's something you'll come into when you go home, or I'm not quite sure, but I just felt that strongly from the Lord. So I just want to put that out there. And one of the fun things about what I get to do is, again, I talk about frustrations, but I think that's what drives research often. I want to know about something. I want to know why, what is the missing part of this? So my piece with food has always been just, feet on the ground, practical, family, farm, garden, company, that level. And as the Lord has just opened my heart to that bigger picture, I was like, God, how can that happen? Because it doesn't matter how many of me there are duplicated around the country or the world, we can't feed everybody. It's just not going to happen. We need the networking people. We need the people that next level up, that connect cities and connect, businesses and enterprises and countries. And then we met Terry and Grace. And see, that's Terry's calling. He's that big picture person that connects on that level. And then, so it's really been fun. So you will hear him. He and I have a lot of similar interests. He's very interested in food, very interested in gardening. And this time, I'm speaking quite a bit about food, and I'll do some of the gardening too. And you'll find a very different but complementary perspective between the two of us, because he's big picture. This is how it looks, big picture. And I am, like feet on the ground, and then we come together and meshes in the middle. And I think you're really going to hear an interesting perspective, and I'm excited to hear your ideas after we're done. Okay, so let's move on. These are your choices. Next one. All right, if you refuse to plan, ramen noodles, Spam, peanut butter, canned soups, peanut butter, diet soda, crackers, and peanut butter. All right, anybody been there? You got that stuff in your basement? All right, next one. And if someone else says you're planning, it could look like this. Lots of MREs, TVP. There is a freeze-dried Neapolitan ice cream. I've not tried it. I don't know if I'd want to spend my money on that. And then buckets of wheat are fine as long as you know what to do with them. Not much variety. Okay, but if you do your planning, hopefully it's going to look like the next one. Plan and store what you eat. Yummy stuff on there. Anything you see, those things can be made with stored foods. It doesn't have to be prepackaged, just on-the-go stuff. There's a place for that, but over the long term, it won't bring balance to your diet. So anyway, we're going to look at some of those options. Okay, next one. Once again, peaceful, purposeful, practical. Store what you eat and eat what you store. During those normal, like non-emergency times, if you don't plan, you could just end up with wasted time or money or inconvenience. But when we are really in a widespread disaster situation, adequate planning could save lives. And that's true whether you're an emergency planner or a parent with young children, no matter what. The fact that you've made a plan and worked your plan is going to be huge. Okay, another thing is that our just-in-time delivery system, along with our just-in-time purchasing habits, have made us very vulnerable. We, along with that convenience, comes a dependence that can be a problem. At first it seems wise because we think, well, we're saving time, energy, and money maybe because we can spend our time doing something else. But in the long term, we become soft and complacent as a nation. And we've just forgotten a lot of the skills that we so desperately need. We've even lost the understanding about what's seasonal, the foods that are seasonal versus not seasonal, because they're available year-round. We've lost basic skills to the next generation. Most of us saw our grandparents farm and garden, and even if we've not gardened ourselves, we've seen it done, but many of the children have never even seen that. And then, too, just not only those basic things, but so many families, their lives are so busy, and cluttered, they don't even sit down together to share a meal in the evening. So relationships are fragile, many times fragmented, and we just have a long way to go to get back to that peaceful, purposeful lifestyle. And I don't recommend building preparations around a certain event at all. Events come and go. Maybe they come, maybe the Lord has mercy and it doesn't come. Whatever it is that we're sensing in our heart. We don't know, and we can't predict accurately timing on anything, and we also can't predict what's going to impact us the most. And we can't prepare for everything at all. So, again, it's got to be peaceful, meaning not fear-based. It's got to be purposeful, moving forward incrementally, and practical, that it works in our present surroundings. And, like as it relates to food, I am using wheat from buckets that I stored pre-Y2K. Does that bother me? Not at all. It's fine. It's a hedge against inflation. It's simple. It's available. I use it. And so it wasn't a problem to me that I didn't need it then. And then, too, I think what it does is if you really start incorporating any food you store or your approach to storing food and using food, if you incorporate that today, you will save money in the long run. And you'll save time in the long run. And you'll probably eat better because you're paying attention to what you're eating. So there's value, whether or not there isn't a focused event that might come or might not. All right. Hopefully I've convinced you of the need. And you may be asking, where do I start? That's just an example of some things we pulled out on what we did is we set up these shelves. They're just like from Sam's or Costco. And we thought, could we put 2 weeks worth of stuff on those shelves? Just to help people understand storage. And we did, and then we unloaded them, and then Rod took some water pictures, and I took some pictures of things, just normal stuff that you could get from the grocery store, because that's where you need to start. 3 days. Okay, think 3 days. Those would be emergency things like, that's where your MREs would be practical. That's where your meal bars or granola bars or whatever you can grab and go would be practical for that 3-day thing. Meals ready to eat. I'm going to go over that. That's those kind of prepackaged military meals. And then think 3 days or 3 weeks to 3 months. Now, emergency planners will say be ready for 2 weeks. But why not go for 3 and then have enough to share? 3 weeks is not that much food. Anybody can do that. And I really recommend that what you do is just make a list of what you normally buy. Actually, go back and make your list of what you eat, and I think you'll find that the meals rotate. You typically will eat certain things over and over again. Make a list of those, take a careful look at them, and say, okay, which of these things would adapt? Which things could I pre-purchase foods for? Which things could I maybe grow things for or acquire them from somewhere else, trade for them or whatever, however you get them. But which things could I manage that way? And then start stocking up. Anything that's not perishable, stock up for 3 weeks to 3 months. And then we'll talk differently about the 3 months beyond. But what happens is people start thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to store for a year. And then they freeze and then they don't get any further. And, why not 3 weeks? What that keeps us from doing is making those expensive runs to the grocery store, those not planned runs that cost us more money. All right, and as you're looking at those foods, think about what they require for preparation, what kind of fuel usage for preparation, because you want things that are relatively simple. And from there, I don't normally buy like canned chili, but it would be nice in an emergency to be able to open a can and heat it. And what else do you see there? Some soups. You see a non-electric can opener. That would be huge. Possibly cereals, dried fruit. Definitely the French press coffee maker. And but hot chocolate, tea. Yeah. Oh, the beef jerky. That's for my husband. Okay. And I also have like Mountain House type. And then there are even the these are just the instant soups from the grocery store, or they're actually dehydrated soups. They're easy to do and don't require any extra ingredients. A lot of them don't. And then one of the ideas we heard from an emergency planner is the pancake mix that requires only water. He suggested keeping those on hand because they're great for children. You can stir in things. You can use it for bread. You can cook pancakes on anything. And you can make them into sandwiches. You can make them into peanut butter sandwiches. You can do anything with that. And all you need is water. And that we're working on a bag of that. We don't normally use it. We take it to Colorado with us every summer, and I'm working on the third summer, and it's still fine, open and closed. So even those kinds of things work for up to your 3-month mark without a problem. Okay, date and rotate. That would be important. First in, first out. We know that. So all we're doing so far is stocking up. All right? Then we start looking at the long-term storage. All right, the next, and that's more of the basement shelves. Nothing unique there. Okay, so what are my options? When we're thinking long-term storage, what are the words that are being thrown around, and what do they mean, and which do we choose, and how does all that work? The MREs, Meals Ready to Eat, were first designed for the military, and they have improved a lot over recent years. They are lightweight, they're easy to pack, they're a little bulky, but they're nice for a 3-day emergency type situation. Now, you do pay for the convenience, so keep that in mind. So if it's for an individual who's on the go a lot and wants that convenience, that would be great. For a large family, probably not so practical. And according to the U.S. Army, the shelf life varies dramatically with temperature changes, and that's true for any stored food, but this is what they say. Stored at 60 degrees, shelf life is more than 10 years. But stored at 100 degrees, it's less than 2 years. So huge range of shelf life there. So if you're storing something like that in a go bag in the car, be sure you're rotating because it will get stale quickly. It doesn't mean it's going to hurt you necessarily, but it just won't be as appetizing and won't have the nutritional value. Okay, then we have freeze-dried foods, and I hope you sampled some of the freeze-dried dehydrated foods back there. I just think that's such a privilege to be able to open the cans and compare, because freeze-dried foods have improved dramatically. That's one of those technology changes that I think has been great over the last few years. They have much of the same color, texture, shape, and flavor and nutrition as fresh. They're when it's done commercially, the food is flash frozen in a vacuum chamber. Okay, then low-level heat's applied, ice crystals evaporate without going back to liquid. So 98% of the moisture is removed. And then it was low-level heat that was applied. So you got the nutritional content intact, which is really nice. And very little preparations required. Just add water. It can be cold water. It can be hot water. And you can even munch those things the way they are. What I've heard with the fruits, particularly the dried strawberry slices, is they don't last. You open the can, they're gone. So usually that's not a problem. Sometimes you'll see the freeze-dried foods packaged in main dish type packets that have a little heater. When you see the pouches for sale at different places, whether it's a preparedness supplier like what we have or whether it's on the shelf at Walmart, be sure and look at who the manufacturer is and what it is, whether it's freeze-dried or dehydrated, because a lot of those are also dehydrated, which means they require cooking. Freeze-dried does not. You just add water. The dehydrated requires cooking. And what I have found is with the dehydrated is if they're older, they require a lot more cooking. So they might say to you 10 minutes, but it might really be 20 before it's totally done. So test those things. Before you buy quantity of anything, I would always recommend that you test it to be sure that it's what you're expecting it to be. The primary suppliers for like the freeze-dried foods are Mountain House, Provident Pantry, Alpine Air. Rainy Day Foods is another one that's back there. And they're all basically, like the freeze-dried dehydrated basic foods are basically the same. Okay? What is different is their entrees. Their entrees, their labeling, their packaging. Okay, so when I start talking about specific ones, some of you have heard some of those brands more than others. And essentially, if you're going to buy freeze-dried strawberries from any of those, they're probably about the same. All right. Now, the difference between the can and the packet, same product, different shelf life. So some of those make a difference, but the basic product would be the same. Okay, so for dehydration, they use high heat. 97% of the moisture is removed. Okay, that's commercially. At home, you can also dehydrate. It's hard to get that much more. You'll never get that much moisture out. More like 85% usually is what you do at home. So home dehydration, and we may come back to that if there's time a little bit. You just have to use a little more care in your handling, and you have to use it more quickly. But the commercially dehydrated things last long time. And while I'm at the home, I think I'll go ahead and mention you can use an electric dehydrator at home, very simple. Sometimes an oven can be used. And over the last couple of weeks, you could have used a solar dehydrator here. I mean, in Missouri, usually you cannot dehydrate outside. I mean, you just can't because we have so much humidity. We just don't have that long, dependable stretch of sun. But we have had that recently. Some of you in other parts of the country, that might be a good option for you too. And for those small amounts of things that you have coming in from gardens, that's a great way to use them. Okay, the other thing is what Terry had referred to, I think, earlier today, the wet pack foods, just your normal canned foods. Those things have their place. And the best plan is going to include a mixture probably of all of this. Those wet pack canned foods, and we have heard this from repeated sources. Of course, nobody will put it on paper because they don't want to be liable for it. But if you've cared for those and they're not bulging, there's no compromise in the can, they last a lot longer than the expiration date. I mean, a lot longer. So don't be afraid to use those as long as you have taken care of them. And again, Rod mentioned earlier, the juice serves as a water source, so that's kind of nice too. And then you can mix those. You can mix those in with your maybe dehydrated or freeze-dried, and you get a lot more variety. Okay, the packaged foods or mixes, and I pointed out on that shelf some of those like soup mixes. Anytime you add a layer of protection, you expand the shelf life. So like if you have those and put them down like in an airtight tub or bucket, you extend the shelf life. So that's another thing you can do. Okay, types of packaging. Let's see. Terry's going to talk more about this. I just want to hit on it because for you to understand some of the plans that are offered and to distinguish the advantages and disadvantages, you need to at least have a basis on here. You're familiar with the buckets, the different lid types. They're the number 10 cans. There's another 2.5 can, which is about a quart. It's about the size of those large cans of fruit, and you'll see that referred to sometimes. And then we have pouches. And then the other is one thing that we have that Prepare the Way has that nobody else does that I know of, is those big IBC containers. I mean, you can buy grain and things in those and store it that way. Amazing. Variety. Now, one thing I want to mention to you about buckets, a lot of the container depends on what you're storing, but like rice, wheat, things that store for long term, typically you'll find them in buckets. If you are storing yourself and purchase or in getting buckets from somewhere, be sure they're food grade. Be careful about that. And then the disadvantage of buckets has always been getting the lid off and resealing it again. And I hope over there you have seen these gamma lids. Terry's mentioned them, and he'll probably mention them to you again. They are the best things in sliced bread. They're wonderful. And the way I use them is I have, like, say I have 10 buckets of wheat. Well, the bucket that's open gets the gamma lid. And then it's easy to get in and out of. And then when I open the next bucket, I move it to that one. Yes. You're not at all? Okay. Okay. Yes. Food grade, yes. Okay, he's asking about how do you know if it's food grade. Food grade containers are labeled, this is what my sources have said, HDPE and have a number 2 on the bottom. And they also say most white buckets are food grade. Uh-huh. Now, the other thing you can do, another question? Oh, you want to see me drop everything. Right. Like if you have an open bucket of beans, this would be, you'd have one on it, an open bucket of rice, an open bucket of wheat. So you might want several, but you don't need one for every bucket. This pops on the bucket. It works for the big buckets. It works for even those 3.5-gallon buckets. And then, this is easy. And it's tight. These are made well. And then you just screw this on the top and it seals well. It's so nice. Oh my goodness. Those old lids, a good lid was just impossible to get off. And we've saved so many broken fingernails with that. They're great. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to is you read about the Mylar bags. I don't know if the Mylar is actually, it's kind of like, it's a name brand, kind of like Kleenex is for tissues, but they're polyester. And it's a heavier thing than like the Mylar balloons. And you hear about this, and I've heard mixed reports. Some companies are really pushing this, and I'll tell you when I would use it. It's not necessary most of the time. If you have a really heavy, good bucket with a good tight seal and it's been packaged well, you're fine. But like if you had maybe a bucket that you weren't so sure about, this could be your inner liner. I mean, that would be a way to protect it if you weren't positive and you wanted to package your own. Or if you had like something that maybe was a cracked grain that you ended up with in a bucket, because anytime the grain is cracked, it doesn't last as long. This might be another layer of protection. But most of the time, I mean, this is kind of a new thing. And, some people are really strong on it. It's a personal choice. It's probably not absolutely necessary. And again, it might depend on, how long you really think you're going to store for, and then what your conditions are. All those things enter into that. But I wanted you to at least see it. This is the size that would go in one of those big buckets. And I don't know, these things are around, I think, in maybe $3, something like that for this size. So your expense is increasing too. Okay, so how do you know which container is best? A lot of it depends on the type of food. Long-term storage foods like grains, white rice, things that will last a long, long time, and you'll use them. Buckets are great. That's a great source. If you have a large family, you may use buckets in all sorts of things. The things that are more perishable, the number 10 cans are usually the thing of choice. It depends on how fast you're going to use it. Also depends on the size of your family and how much food you're working with. If you're getting 1,000 pounds of grain, then you're not going to want to put all that in number 10 cans. You'd want buckets, maybe an IBC container. The way Terry does it is he takes those and freezes them for an extended time, and then that takes care of the issues with insects and eggs and all the storage, and he'll talk more about that. But, if you have part of it depends on what you have access to what your final choice is. And then your goals for length of storage, availability, cost, and then your storage conditions and space. Okay, next one. Yes, question. The oxygen absorbers with the Mylar bags? I don't think so. I have some oxygen absorbers here in my little stash to show you. They look like this. The thing with them is once this is opened, I have it here just for a sample to show you, but once this package is opened, they need to be used quickly. And how many you use in your product depends on the product. If it's a dense product without a lot of air, like maybe a number 10 can of wheat, 1 is plenty. Some buckets you can use as many as 8. So their purpose is to remove oxygen from the product. And honestly, I will have to look to see if it's recommended that you use both together. As I'm thinking about it, I think it is. But I will check that because I have that resource to check. Okay, so now I want to get to the question that you've probably been asking more than other, and it's the one that nobody, I don't think, has done a very good job answering, and it's the one that propelled me into researching food storage. And I also think it's one thing that sets Prepare the Way apart from other suppliers. We'll show you how to plan what you need and how to use the things you've actually stored. So there are these recommended. How do they decide how much you need? When they say 1 year, 1 person, how do they decide that? Do you know where all that came from? Well, your grandparents did it, right? I mean, great-grandparents or whoever. A long time ago, they grew season to season, and there was an understanding of how much it would take for the family till the next year, and certain things were purchased in bulk. Well, really, since then, starting in the 1960s, the Mormon Church is the one that has done most of the work on this. And I'm going to try to stand in my spot for Chris and not spill everything and show you. But go on to the next slide. I think we'll show. Okay, not yet. We'll get to that in just a second. Basically, the way you'll see it set up is there are categories. Okay, next one's fine. You'll see things separated into grains. Then there will be a beans and legumes, fats and oils, milk and dairy, sweeteners, and then sometimes they'll have a baking essentials. Okay, so most of the time when you see a 1-year plan set up, it's going to, and I'm going to talk about 1-year plan just so it's consistent, but then I'll break it down a little bit too. But you'll see those categories. Okay, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about those. All right, now one thing you'll see that's missing on the, as we go through like the milk and dairy, there's of course no fresh milk, so it's all going to be the dry milk. You'll see it'll just look different because they're things that are packaged for long term. But nonetheless, those are the categories. Okay, next one. Now, our ancestors did it. They had their root cellars and they did home canning. Okay? Next. All right. Now we're up to what they called the Mormon Four. And I just thought this was really intriguing. There's a woman called Esther Dickey that in the 1960s wrote this book, Passport to Survival, and I actually got one of them off Amazon just to go back and see what they really said because I'd read about it. All the references come back to this, and oh my goodness, this is it. All right, now, you think it's a challenge to plan. If this was all you had in your house and you're eating for a year, can you imagine? She has like 2,000, I don't know, ways to use wheat in here. It's unbelievable. Things you wouldn't ever, wheat candy, wheat, I mean, everything under the sun. And you can look at this later if you want. But this is what it would be. Only this is not proportional. There would be 300 pounds of wheat, 85 pounds of powdered milk, 60 pounds of sugar or honey, and 6 pounds of salt. But that's what it was made up of, okay? And most of the plans you read about stem from that. There is some expansion in some way, shape, or form. Yes. Of the amounts, the wheat was 300 pounds, powdered milk was 85, sweetener, sugar, or honey was 60, salt was 6. Okay, so as I kept looking, then the next slide, I think, shows the amounts that are recommended by category. There is usually an expansion from that, an update. All right, so now they've broken it down, and they have back to those categories I showed you earlier. Okay, so let's look at these and see what that might look like. When they talk about grains, that 300 pounds of grain, a 6 gallon, I think Well, it would be the tall white bucket. I think most of those are 5. The tall white buckets are 45 pounds. 6-gallon bucket is 45 pounds, like of wheat. So 300 pounds of grain is about, between 6 and 7 buckets. All right. Those can be an assortment of grains. So some of the possibilities might be wheat, corn, oats, rice, barley, could be pastas. With the rices, you know that white rice stores indefinitely, brown rice does not. Brown rice is difficult to store, so you would, if you wanted to store that and nutritionally, definitely it's better, you would put it in the number 10 can and use it more quickly. With the grains, the whole wheat stores almost indefinitely. It will just, and white rice is the same thing. It just stores forever. And even under less than best conditions, they store well. Some of the other things, the rule of thumb is once that kernel is compromised, once you've cracked it, like an oat, once you've rolled it, anytime you've done anything to the kernel, it shortens the shelf life. So if you are truly thinking long term, you're better off buying whole grains and a grinder. And then grind it when you need it. All right. Otherwise, it doesn't matter so much. Okay, the legumes and beans. The numbers I've seen go anywhere from 34 to 60 to 90 pounds. And I think the difference is probably, if you notice here, there's no category like for fruits and vegetables. And I think probably those that say 34 pounds would allow for that. And the others would say 60 to 90, if that's where all of that was coming from, was your beans and legumes. And again, variety is important there. 1 person, 1 year. Mm-hmm. And then fats and oils, 26 pounds. That may look like a lot to you, but if you're under stress, you need more. And then the other difference I found is the powdered milk, dairy, and eggs. Some say 16 pounds, some say as much as 60. And I thought, well, maybe they're talking reconstituted powdered milk, which may be the distinction. I haven't been able to find that answer. But if I'm going to err, I'm going to err on the side of caution, and I would say, hold back more rather than less. And then sweeteners, 60 pounds. Those sweeteners last forever. Honey, sugar, lasts forever, whatever you choose to use in there. And then some people put eggs in with the powdered milk. Some people have a meats and beans they put together, and they would put eggs with that for protein source. There are some little bit different. Peanut butter sometimes is in fats and oils. Sometimes it's in another category. So some of those move around a little bit, but it gives you an idea of what you're looking for. Okay, so let's think about what you eat and compare. Generally, for complete protein, the ratio of grains to beans is 3 to 1. So 3 part grain, 1 part bean for complete protein. The other thing with this is it's lacking any kind of spices. It's lacking any kind of comfort food. And comfort food is something that is necessary. As much as you can, you need things that are familiar, especially if you have children or elderly people that you're caring for. That appetite fatigue is real, and you need to plan ahead for that. The other thing in here that you might make note of is that the foods they are assuming that you're purchasing, none of it has been pre-cooked. These are all things that require cooking, which means you need to think about fuel and you need to think about the process of knowing how to do that. All right, the next one. Let's look at some of the plans. And Rod, while we're starting here, will you pass those out? I left a packet back for you. We're real quickly going to go through these. What I have done is pulled the 2 ranges. I pulled one of the most basic plans that I've seen, which is almost all the whole foods, and it's going to be sample 1 as he gets those passed out. And then there's sample number 4, and it is all like the entrees, prepackaged type things. Neither do I recommend, okay? And I finally put a disclaimer on these because I passed them around and worked with them before, and I was reminded, if somebody just saw those there and picked them up, they would think that's what you're telling people to do, and it's not. I just want you to know what you're going to find when you start looking at food storage plans. The price range is somewhere around $800 to around $4,000 for 1 person for 1 year. And you need to know what you're getting for your money. Are you getting peace of mind? Are you getting nutrition? But more importantly, will you truly be prepared? Now, as these plants are being developed, basically they're going back to what I just showed you with categories. You'll see things you recognize here. Let's look at sample 1 first. That's the year's supply of basic food storage for one person. The cost, and this was several months ago, so it's higher now, I'm sure, but it doesn't matter. It's one of the least expensive you would find. And this is how it's set up. You have 13 6-gallon buckets. Okay, picture your storage here. You've got 3 hard red wheat, 2 hard white wheat. And in case you're not familiar with the difference of those, nutritionally they're the same, storage is the same. The white wheat is a milder taste. So if you're transitioning your family and they don't think they like whole wheat products, white wheat might be the answer for you. The other thing you need to know about any of these whole grains, and particularly I've heard this with the wheat, is be sure your body can digest them and work them into your diet slowly. So this is definitely not the kind of thing you want to just one day be on your white bread, and I don't even know what the brands are anymore. I used to would have said Wonder Bread. Is it still white Wonder Bread? And then you cross over to whole wheat bread. You need to give yourself time to adjust. But anyway, those are your choices with the wheats. And then you have white rice. They have rolled oats, pinto beans, small white beans, black beans, and then an instant milk. One thing I'll make note of here is the instant milk, non-fat milk, is what you'll see because the fat in the milk would make it go rancid. So for storage, it's non-fat. Then they have 6 number 10 cans. They have a shortening powder, which, shortening powder, and then there is a butter powder, and there is a margarine powder. Those are really kind of interesting. You just stir a little water in. Like you take, a teaspoon of water to a half a teaspoon, or maybe it's a tablespoon of product, teaspoon of water. Just a small amount to moisten it. And you get a similar product. But if you're baking, you could just stir in the powder and adjust your liquids. But those are available. And then they have baking powder, baking soda, salt, sugar. Then they have the smaller cans of a chicken bouillon, beef bouillon, some yeast, and a lid remover. Okay. Does that make you hungry? That's those gallon cans back there. Yeah, the number 10 cans. The 2.5 cans are like the 1 quart, 20. I call them the large fruit can, 28 ounce type. Okay, let's look at the other extreme. You don't want to mess with any of that. You don't want to cook. You just want to go home, add your water, and eat. All right, this is what you might end up with. Now, this is a reputable company. I'm not going to tell who, but it's a reputable company that produced both these. I just typed them as I saw them, okay? I just took the extremes of what they recommended. So these are real. I didn't make them up. All right, we have main dishes, and there's some decent variety. You're getting 6 cans, 6 number 10 cans, and all of this is number 10 cans. All of it's freeze-dried. And I think I actually put the price on yours. Yeah. Okay. Notice the main dishes. Do you see a problem in here anywhere? I think you guys have dealt with this enough that I'll test you before I tell you the answer. Do you see a problem with any of that? I mean, are you happy with that if that's what you're buying? Well, yeah, but we're not even talking price yet. We're talking about what you're buying. Okay, what's the problem that you see with it? Well, that's true. Now, they're assuming that you're going to get some grain and protein and vegetables in your main dishes. They're assuming that. Well, is there anything else you wouldn't want to spend your money on, or am I the only one having trouble with this? Yeah, those drink mixes. Look at how many. It's not 1 can. 6 cans of peach drink, 6 cans of apple drink, 12 cans of orange drink. And that's like buying Tang. Yeah, you're buying sugar, basically. Okay, so they've just padded this with 24 cans of drink mix. These are the number 10 cans. So yes, you've got all those cans of main dishes, but you've also got 24 cans of drink mix. And then... That's a good point. And, in reason, it would be something, yes, within reason. Yeah, and you know what? For people who don't drink water, or if your water's off tasting a little bit, the drink mix is good for that. And it has its place. And like one of the recipes that I feature is that I'll talk more about is an uncooked, it's a muesli that you can just do so many things with, but orange juice in it helps keep the fruit from turning dark. So you could use the orange drink mix. I mean, there are applications. I'm not saying that's bad, but 24 cans of it's a little overboard. And then did you see the crackers down under snacks? 12 cans. Well, they're assuming you're going to get, there's side dishes. There's corn, sweet peas, but then 6 cans of rice, too. I know. It's really, that's where they're making the money. Yes, you're getting the main dishes, but there's padding in there. Watch that. When you look at these plans, pay attention to what is in your package so that your money's spent wisely. Now, they are convenient. I will give them that. Okay, so this is kind of the test on the next one, helpful guidelines. And hang on to that, and you may want to write notes as we go through some of the things I really recommend on those. But it sure gives you a range of what your possibilities are. Okay, next. All right, that was sample 1, and we saw that. That's sample 4. Those are kind of what we saw. Okay, so one more. Here we go. All right, so when you're making your choice, these are your considerations. Fuel and water availability. Will you evacuate or shelter in place? Or both. Specific needs of family members, infant, elderly, allergies. Necessary equipment. Grain grinder, is that necessary? And see, in this last one you looked at, Plan 4, you wouldn't need one. There were no whole grains. If you got Plan 1, you would most certainly need one. Storage space and conditions, and we're going to talk more about ideal storage space later, but you are very aware of where you would store your food, I'm sure. Your budget. And then something else that's kind of nice, just as a general rule of thumb, it doesn't hold true for every single thing, but for main dishes, one of those number 10 cans is about 10 servings, 10 1-cup servings. Okay, that's another thing to think about. If you have this can and you have hungry teenagers in your home, do you think that they're going to be happy with a 1-cup serving of a main dish that's mostly pasta? Probably not. And many of those, the way they're set up, that when they list how many servings you're getting, they're counting that like your whole meal. So watch for that too. Then be sure you have comfort foods, familiar foods, and then practice. Cook from it once a week. Okay, next slide. Okay, these are some other things I found out in my work on this that I thought would be helpful to you. The first one I mentioned, and then there's this rule of 8, because you know how you're thinking, okay, I've got this bucket, I have these cans, and how does it compute? And what if I think I need a bucket of something, but I'd rather get it in cans? How many? It's close to this. It takes about 8 number 10 cans for a bucket. And then the little 1-pound cans, and I think that might be the next slide. Yeah, the little 1-pound like green bean cans, I think they're 13 or 14 ounces now. They used to be a pound. It takes about 8 of those for the number 10 can, and about 8 number 10 cans to equal the bucket. So remember that rule of 8. Yeah, I did everything based on 6-gallon bucket because that's what I have. 5-gallon buckets are much more they're easier to handle. For women, particularly, if you're short at all, those 6-gallon buckets, there's just not enough space between your hand and the floor to carry them. It's really awkward, even if you can handle the weight. The 5 gallons a much more usable amount or usable size. But that's, again, something to watch for.